Hi, all. I am Natalie Furlett. I'm the Director for Partnerships and Member Engagement with Campus Compact, and we are very excited to have you here for this webinar on community partnerships. As I mentioned, we are recording, so just know that. And we look forward to hearing what is going to be presented today. So I'm going to hand it over to Star to do introductions. And if you have any issues, technical issues while things are happening, feel free to reach out to me or to Shaquan McDowell, who is also here from our Campus Compact staff, and we will try and help figure that out for you. All right, Star, take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Star Plaxton-Moore, and I'm Campus Compact's Faculty Development Fellow this year, which is a very exciting honor. And I'm also the Director of Community Engaged Learning at the Leo T. McCarthy Center for Public Service and the Common Good at University of San Francisco. I just want to thank Natalie, Shaquan, and the Campus Compact team for collaborating with me on organizing this webinar. And I want to welcome our participants. If you haven't already done so, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat and share whatever information you would like other folks to know about you. I'm so delighted to be here with all of you and excited for this conversation between faculty members and community partners who truly embody the mutually transformative partnerships that we aspire to in the field of higher education community engagement. I'll introduce the panelists to you momentarily, but first I just wanted to say a bit about this topic, and we want to do a couple of quick polls to see who's in the room. When we provide faculty development for community engagement, we tend to focus on the basics of how to identify, develop, and sustain community partnerships that provide meaningful engagement for our students while also meeting community identified, or more often community partner identified priorities. We know that this is a necessary aspect of preparing faculty for community engaged teaching in partnership with community organizations and members. And it seems that as a field, we largely agree that community partners are truly co-educators in our community engaged learning endeavors, bringing expertise, lived wisdom, and other gifts to the partnership that we could never replicate within the confines of our classrooms. However, as a field, I think we've spent less energy and time really examining the role of interpersonal relationships in these community campus partnerships. How are we modeling for students how to be in relationship with each other in a way that fosters genuine trust, personal learning and growth, and a foundation for real transformation for our communities? How can we situate ourselves as comrades and co-conspirators with our partners to work toward the just and equitable society to which we aspire? We hope the panel discussion today and the following breakout room conversations allow you to explore these questions and the possibilities of enhancing and elevating our community engaged work by attending to interpersonal relationships within that work. So I want to transition and deploy a couple of polls for us to answer. And I'm just going to let you know this is my first time using polls, so hopefully it goes smoothly, because the panelists and I really want to get to know you as a group a little bit better. So the first poll question I have for you is about your role in community campus partnerships. And I'll put it out there now and you can check all that apply. So what role do you play in community campus partnerships? And you can check multiple boxes there. Still waiting for a few more folks to reply. Oh. Okay. We might have gotten everyone who's planning to submit an answer. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and hopefully it will show up for you on your screen. It is really exciting to see so many community partners in this space. Thank you so much for making the time to be here. It was really important to us when we were doing our planning that we invited community partner voices into this space. And it's really great to see you all. Great to see faculty members and staff and some students. So thank you all for taking time to be here. And we'll go, oh, let's see. I needed to share the results. Sorry, I was seeing them. You were all probably wondering what I was talking about. So there's the results for you. As expected, mostly faculty, staff, but really a good, strong number of partners here, as I was saying. Thanks for being here. All right, we'll go to the second one. It's going to go much more smoothly because I've had practice now. The second question is more about partnerships, and in your community engaged partnerships, which entities do you work with? And this is, again, multiple choice. You should be able to select multiple options. So in your community engaged partnerships, which organizations or individuals do you work with? Just waiting to see if we're going to get close to 100% participation. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll for you. And then I'm going to share the results so you actually see what I'm talking about. So lots of folks in this room doing community engaged work are partnering with nonprofit organizations, in particular staff at those organizations. A really high number actually partnering directly with community members. Often, those two things might overlap in terms of folks who are both community members and staff at nonprofits. Folks who are partnering with the colleges and universities, I imagine that's lots of the community partners in the room, but sometimes we might also partner across institutions. People really focused on working with grassroots movements. There's a good number of folks doing that, government agencies. So this is really exciting to see, where you all are finding partnership. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing, and I'm imagining our panelists might be noting that in case they have any comments to make on what they saw in the polls. And speaking of our panelists, I'll take the opportunity to introduce them to you now so we can really maximize our time learning from them. The first person is Holly Horan, Assistant Professor of Anthropology at the University of Alabama. Holly is also a birth and postpartum doula. She was previously a program coordinator for a Medicaid-funded community doula program in Oregon. Her research focuses on the relationship between maternal stress and birth outcomes and the scaling up of collaborative perinatal healthcare, with an emphasis on the inclusion of doulas as members of the perinatal healthcare team. And then we have Susan Petrus, Executive Director of Business Operations at Birthwell Partners. Susan has a master's in English from Auburn University and a welding diploma from Bessemer State Technical College. She is a DONA certified birth doula and a Lamaze certified childbirth educator. She is the mother of 2 children and devotes her time to improving the health of each person who gives birth and works to ensure the best start for every infant. Susan and Holly, feel free, if you haven't already, because I'm not really monitoring the chat, feel free to put any links in the chat to Birthwell Partners or any other relevant information about your work. Next, I want to introduce Antone Henshaw, who is a Rutgers Camden School of Criminal Justice graduate school student and the CEO and founder of Transformative Justice Initiative and creator of Meet 'em at the Gate. He's a founding member of NJ STEP, New Jersey Scholarship and Transformative Education in Prisons program, which began organizing in Trenton State Prison in 1992. Mr. Henshaw is also a motivational speaker, entrepreneur, new entry opportunity specialist for Camden County, and one of the lead credible messengers in New Jersey. Mr. Henshaw has dedicated himself to eradicating mass incarceration and transforming legislation to end the structural violence that threatens the public health of our communities. He's an outspoken advocate against police brutality in and outside of the carceral spaces of New Jersey. He's committed to educating the community about the machinations of brutality that permeate the carceral state that is disproportionately directed at Black and Brown carceral citizens. And finally, Benjamin Berger, Executive Director of the Lang Center for Civic and Social Responsibility and Associate Professor of Political Science at Swarthmore College. Under Dr. Berger's Lang Center leadership, Swarthmore has achieved international recognition as an engaged scholarship leader among liberal arts colleges. His Lang Center team was chosen as Campus Compact's sole partner to lead the nationwide Engaged Scholars Initiative, and Lang Center programming earned Swarthmore the Excellence in Student Engagement Award from the International Engagement Scholarship Consortium, for which Berger now serves on the executive committee. In 2009, he was named Princeton University's Lawrence S. Rockefeller Visiting Professor for Distinguished Teaching, instructing a combined class of incarcerated students and Princeton undergraduates at East Jersey State Prison. He served on nonprofit boards and civic committees and has expanded and deepened Swarthmore College's collaborations in Chester, Philadelphia, and surrounding regions. Berger's book, Attention Deficit Democracy, The Paradox of Civic Engagement, won the NASSP Best Book Award in 2011. He's written for a variety of political science journals and has been a repeat guest on NPR program, Radio Times, as well as KYW, News Radio's in-depth radio broadcasts and podcasts. So Anton and Ben, feel free to put any links in the chat about any of your individual or collaborative work if you haven't already. And I will just say once again to all of you, welcome panelists. We're so glad to be with you. I have some questions to guide our discussion, but I'm also hoping we can recapture the magic from our planning meeting in which a really thoughtful and organic conversation emerged among the panelists. For participants, if questions arise as our panelists are talking, feel free to put them in the chat. And Natalie and Shaquan and I will come back to them when we facilitate the Q&A. So let's get started. I'll put out our first question, and maybe we'll ask Holly and Susan to respond first. Can you briefly describe the work that you do together and the origin story of how you came to be in partnership?
Who do you want to start? Susan, would you like to go first, or would you like me to go?
Well, Holly, if you would go, because I think you were introduced to the organization before I actually met you, and then I can kind of chime in.
Yeah, so I connected with Birthwell very early on in my career here at the University of Alabama. And I had just left a community doula program that I was the coordinator for in Oregon, and I had come here for my job as an assistant professor. And I was reading in the literature one day, and I saw that there was a paper that came out about a community doula organization in Birmingham, and outcomes data that they had in collaboration working with academics. And I said to myself, well, it can't hurt to just try to reach out to that first author and just see what's possible about connecting. And so I was able to connect with another scholar in this work who set up a meeting between Birthwell and myself and that individual. And I will admit, as easy as it was to get connected, that first meeting is always, one that you really have to navigate, because our community partner that we work with at Birthwell, who's named Dahlia Abrams, was like, what do you want? It's cool that you do doula work, but what do you want? What do you want from us, and how can we help you? And so that began a conversation around how do we find alignment in our interests and the work that we do in perinatal health, which was super helpful for setting up the stage of how to move forward in a potential partnership. And so I met with these folks in the fall of 2019. And over time, we have slowly started working on different projects, and I've become more involved with Birthwell, both as a board member. I'm the president of the board for the Birthwell Partners, as well as a volunteer doula for that organization. So there's been a lot of give and take over the last few years in terms of energy invested in each other's work. And then Susan and I have had a chance to work together more closely, I would say probably in the last 6 months to a year. And I'll stop there, Susan.
Okay. I would say Dahlia's not here, but she was very, very excited when she found out about you and after that initial meeting. So if it didn't get communicated to you, it got communicated to me. There's this person, she does research, we need to connect with her. So that's the feedback I was hearing from my co-director. But I really didn't start working with Holly until I participated in one of the projects that she was doing to focus on data collection for our doulas. So that's, I guess, the first time that I really worked with Holly. But as she mentioned, it's like that was one thread, and now we've got these multiple threads, and she's interwoven into our organization, and we want to keep her there.
Great. Ben and Tone, do you want to chime in and share your origin story and the work that you're doing together?
Myself and Ben's origin story is kind of, in my words, kind of weird, because I heard about him, but I didn't get to meet him. And it was I had came home, and Ben was looking for someone to help him how to navigate the space of East Jersey. And they kept saying, you need to meet Professor Ben. And I'm like, well, who is Professor Ben? And they were like, yeah, he needs help with all of the stuff that he's trying to do. Ben had these grandiose ideas of going up against the behemoth of New Jersey's Department of Corrections. And, he just wanted to do some good things. And I'm sitting there saying like, yeah, you're the good kind of trouble, but that trouble there, it was something totally different. So he was just trying to help build the library up in the NJ STEP library, New Jersey Scholarship and Transformative Education in Prison. And I was saying to Ben, I said, yeah, you can't go to the mailroom or to the administrator. You got to go to the church. And he was like, what do you mean? Why can't I go right to the people that are approving the program? I said, that's not how it works. You donate the books to the chapel, and the chapel will get them to the program. And he said, I've never heard anything like this. Why? And, and as we began to build our relationship and talk, and it was brothers that were inside were pushing us together, and I was very busy. But the thing is, I stopped everything for my brothers and sisters that are incarcerated. And what wound up happening was we had our first success, and he was trying to get the books in, and the books got in without any problem. And Ben was like, what else do you do? And I was like, and then it just, he invited me to come speak at an engagement that they were doing on the Princeton campus when he was there. And he also asked me to help train the staff and the students who were actually about to go into the carceral space about what to expect, what the guards would do, how they would be treated, because they had a training. So he had the wherewithal to say, let me get somebody with lived and shared experience to really give us the real stuff that, and in concert with what the DOC was doing, so we can be able to weigh it out. And we've been together ever since. And that's just, a little something, a little snapshot, but I'm quite sure he has a lot more better to say.
Thanks, Tony. Let me just add to that. That's all, right. And what I do want to add is that I think when we first did meet, Tone thought I was kind of a dork, which is true. And because I was just there, I was this new guy. I had taught, I teach at SCI Chester, an institution near Swarthmore, but I hadn't taught it at Rahway at East Jersey State. And so here I was, this new guy, and he was still nice and polite, professional. We got some things done, but as we started to spend time together, and Tone saw that I know how much I don't know, which is a lot. You can feel volume to it. So I just wanted to listen. And it's clear that Tone is, an incredible individual, has scholarship knowledge as well as all the sort of on the ground know-how and stuff, and is basically a psychologist without having done the degree, as well as an attorney without yet having done the degree. So I just listened a lot. And is that like just being together in fellowship and in a shared partnership and with humility and whatever, and I have a lot of that, is what helped to bridge things out. So it started small, this particular thing, can we get this done? And then we started to feel each other out a little bit and spend time and do some driving together to various different events. We talk more, and it was apparent like, hey, wait a second, this could happen. We could do this, or you might know somebody over here. So there's all this kind of then shared social and human capital in there that was just amazing, and doors opened. So it was really just that for me. And since then, I want to say one more thing, which is that once I went back to Swarthmore and the pandemic hit, Tone and I were just talking on the phone and texting and stuff and commiserating, saying how this sucks, you know, our students are stuck inside and all the classes are Zoom based. And we just started brainstorming, what if we just had a win-win and we could give some gigs, some teaching gigs to folks who we couldn't work with the prison population inside because they weren't allowing internet stuff to come in and out. But recent homecomers could help to join our Zoom classes, enrich those Zoom classes because they're flat. We know they're kind of flat and two-dimensional, and share the kind of experience that you do in an inside-out class. And we would also be able to pay them as paid consultants too, and it would be a win-win. And we developed 4 classes during the year like that. And that also was just the basis, was the humility, shared time together, sweat equity and friendship, and then just me being able to follow Tone's genius and all the guys he knows too. So that's a little more piece of the puzzle.
Thank you so much. And I think to some extent you've started to answer the next question, so I might turn it back over to you in case you want to add anything, and then invite Holly and Susan to answer. But I'm curious to hear about, you know, how you would describe the nature of your relationship at this point, and really the value that it brings to you as kind of an individual, as a human, and to the work that you do.
I'll start. I remember having a conversation with Ben. It was like a 45-minute conversation over the phone. And Ben asked me a question. I just came home. I served an inordinate amount of time. I served 100% of a 30-year to life sentence here in the state of New Jersey. And I was told that I would never come home. I would die in prison and things like that. And here it is, I'm on a phone call trying to help people that are still going through what I just endured. And I remember him saying, what was it worth? And I never put any value into helping him or helping anyone, right? And he was like, you know, the information that I got from you in that 45 minutes is priceless. I would never have been able to figure that out, right? And I never thought of myself as a consultant and enough. And he just became a mentor immediately. Like, yo, like you really need to understand what you're capable of and the value of your contribution, not just to people that are incarcerated, but to families and to communities and to stakeholders and things like that. And which is why that conversation allowed me to start Transformative Justice Initiative as a consulting company. And then just having somebody just, you know, to have a thought partner that saw me as a human being or a contributing member, right? That really valued what I thought, what I felt. Even when I struggled, you know, I could call them and just be regular in a relationship, or just about education. It's about the whole person, and developing that, and developing how to move forward and how to bring others with us, and create these safe spaces where you can, you know, it's okay to be intellectually gifted and also have that street side. But it's also creating those safe spaces in which we can share, right? Because it's in these spaces, whether you guys realize it or not, that I begin to heal from those 30 years of trauma that I had to endure, right? And then for a complete stranger to say, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to not understand. And we're going to figure it out together, right? And then to add more love into that space as we developed our bond, you know, and then with him losing Kareem and me losing my brother and stuff like that, where we began to bond on a much more intimate level to get to where we are now. Like, who would have thought you know, a person that served 30 years would sit on a panel with Ben and one of my other professors, Professor Brooks at Yale University. Like you can't even write this, right? And to be able to have that experience, something that I would only read in books, to actually start living it and being able to share with other people. You know, I'm from Camden, New Jersey, so we're one of the poor cities in the country. And when they say, "What, you were at Yale?" Yeah, I was at Yale. You know, like we're not the sum total of our limitations.
Appreciate that, Tone. I'll just say sorry for bleeding over into that second question there, but there, I'm really glad the way you worded the question, because the question is you ask, like, what's the nature, the value to you and your work, and there is a lot of personal value. You can tell from what Tone is saying. Like, we spent a lot of time. We just drove, 4+ hours each way, back and forth to maybe 3 hours and 45 minutes the way I drive, but back and forth to Yale, and had stuff to talk about. Mostly just personal stuff the whole way. But one thing I think is of interest to a lot of folks here is working with Tone and the various other people through TJI and other Camden folks and formerly incarcerated has helped me to think through something that I think we're all thinking through, and that is the relationship of colleges and universities to community partnerships. And the recognition, probably everybody here recognized already, it's why you're here, is that, like, look, knowledge is not just residing in a book. It's not just in a classroom. It's diffuse and spread all over the place, and recognizing the different sources of knowledge and putting them all together is one of the key things we're trying to, work through. But also recognizing I don't mean this in a mean way, but the extractive and exploitative relationship that higher ed has a long time had with community work. And nobody, I think, intended that to be the case. They didn't rub their knuckles and say, let's see what we can get out of folks. It's just that people did what they did, and it wound up, we're on salary, those at the college, and folks in the community may not be. And yet, so we're getting a publication out of it, a class out of it. We're on salary and other folks aren't. And figuring out, wait a second, how can we talk equity, we talk parity, how can we actually elevate voices so they're on the same level? So actually that we in higher ed might be following, walking alongside or walking behind, and helping other folks get stuff done and be compensated for it. And that's been a huge value. Tony, you mentioned thought partner. That's what we are together. And that's been, of immeasurable value to us at the college.
Yeah. Holly and Susan would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think we're in an earlier stage of our relationship than Ben and Tone are. At least Holly and I are. I think she and Dahlia are a little bit further along because they've known each other longer. But from my perspective, it's been enormously helpful to have Holly's experience and expertise, because she has worked with another community doula program. We're the only one in Alabama. And so when we have situations come up, like I needed to talk to Holly this week before we had our meeting about this session, and I just needed to pick her brain and say, look, this is happening. What do you think about this? Have you had this kind of experience? What are your thoughts about how I should proceed with this situation? So that was really, really helpful for me. I've also picked her brain a little bit on things like, how do we incentivize the meetings so that we get our doulas to attend meetings? And she's experienced that working with a community doula project. You need to get people together and share information, but it's kind of hard to get that to happen sometimes. So on that level, I really value. And I'm looking forward to getting to know her better. We have not had any long car rides together, so maybe I get to tag along on some of the focus group trips that she's been taking around the state.
Thanks, Susan. Our time will come for long.
I need a road trip, Holly.
So just to add to that, and things that I'm hearing that are so important and that I feel are so important in this work, is the value of social capital and reciprocity. To me, that those two things are really instrumental in what we do. And when you're at an earlier stage in your working relationship, sometimes you're spending time figuring out what that looks like. And so I spoke a little bit earlier about the ways in which I try to be really involved in supporting Birthwell as an institution outside of my academic responsibilities. But at the same time, the nature of what reciprocity looks like is changing. And so the reason that I value our relationship is for a number of reasons, but some of the primary ones are that unlike some academic community partnerships where there really is a large power differential, there's less of one with my colleagues in Birthwell and I, right? All of us are highly educated folks who are looking to produce better birth outcomes in the state of Alabama. And I think that's important to consider, because I think when we do tend to think about community partnerships, we know there's always a power differential there, but it seems to be extremely uneven a lot of the times. And so that's actually something that's been really interesting to navigate, having community partners who are just like, no, I don't think that's a good idea. Or maybe we should be considering this when it comes to grant writing and thinking about the future of the organization and how we can contribute to the cause of reproductive justice. And something else that's been really valuable for me in terms of this relationship is also thinking about sort of my place in all of this in the community. So I am at the academic institution, but I also work for them as a volunteer, or I volunteer for them as a doula, right? So I occupy multiple positions in our community partnership and inevitably become one of the people that they are training and mentoring and working with to have this program grow. So I feel really embedded in the process, and really a lot of that is because they want me there. It's not like I'm inserting myself there, they want me there. So I really appreciate how we have a different power dynamic than what I think folks think of when they think about community-based partnerships. And of course, personally, one of the things that I appreciate too is being able to talk through the challenges of community-based relationships with my community partners, Dahlia and Susan, in a very honest way. Like, hey, we have this idea, right? We want to build out our training programs and our health equity mission for our Birthwell. Maybe we'll do this and this and this. And they feel really comfortable being like, no, or yeah, that sounds great. Let's explore that more, right? So to me, that feels like a testament to the authenticity of the relationship that we're building.
Thank you. And I love that we kind of have pairs that are at different stages in the relationship, because I mean, the reality is that it takes time to get to that place of being able to have a 4-hour conversation while you're on a car ride together that's both personal and professional, and having that thought partnership, and even getting to the place of folks feeling empowered to say no. Sometimes that takes time as well. So I really appreciate that we're kind of getting perspectives from these different points in relational trajectories, and just want to lift up some things that I'm hearing that I really appreciate. Values of humility, vulnerability. I love that Tone just said love, right? Love, like, could that be something that really guides us in doing our community engaged work and being in relationship with our partners. And I also really appreciate this whole notion of how do we navigate in these different cultural spaces, and how can partners kind of be our guides through that, so that we're able to be of use and be respectful and come in and actually do the work that's needed, and vice versa. Like, how are we helping our partners navigate what we know can be really difficult cultural barriers within our institutions around access to education and resources, et cetera. So I guess kind of coming off of that, it'd be great if you are willing to share a little bit about what are some of the struggles that you faced in your relationships, maybe like that kind of have arisen internally in the relationship, but also like what external forces are you trying to manage as you are in relationship with each other? And maybe this time we'll start with Holly and Susan.
Susan, I always feel like I need your permission before I go first. Do you want me to go first?
Okay.
So the reason I'm laughing is because one of the biggest challenges that we have is with bureaucracy and money, right? So I don't think that surprises anyone here today, but I mean, just getting money that has been earmarked or subcontracted to Birthwell at the university level, I mean, you would swear we're moving mountains and we're talking about a few $1,000s, right? So that is probably the #1 barrier, and having to subject community partners to navigating that challenge, because at some point they have to become involved in making sure that they receive the money and that, you know, they're doing whatever type of reporting is required at your university for that, is actually a really big struggle. I think I've had to become like a grants doula for our other community partner who calls me and is like, what is going on? Why am I filling out another form? You know, so that is the #1 challenge in terms of our partnership. And then another one is just thinking about timelines, right? Timelines in terms of expectations and maintaining that authenticity that I think is so important in these relationships. So being really transparent about, this is what is expected of me in my job, and this is what is expected in the timeline of the grant. And then your community partner, Dahlia, will be like, we have trainings going on that month. We've got other priorities for the organization. So whatever you need can't be a priority. And so we're negotiating priorities constantly. And I wouldn't call that so much as something that's bad, but it's a reality of doing the work. Susan, I'll stop there, dear.
Yeah, I just, since I'm not on a university campus, I don't always understand why we can't just go from A to B. Why do we have to take the roundabout? So yeah, that's, it just feels like, okay, we can do it, but we have to do it this way. And there has to be, there needs to be another focus group before we can get to the part that we want to do. So there's a lot of foundational stuff that maybe we don't have the patience for that has to happen. And ultimately we do understand that it's going to help us, but it just going from A to B would be a little simpler.
And I wouldn't sell yourself short, Susan. I don't think it's patience. I think it's bandwidth, you know?
Yeah, well, patience and bandwidth are kind of going together here.
Review, right? So I think it's also the institution, at least the institution I'm at, is not, we support community engaged work, but we're not quite there in terms of actually having all of the pieces working well and articulating with one another to make that possible and easy to do all the time.
That sounds familiar, and I'm seeing some knowing nods from Ben and Tone. So do you want to jump in?
You're and me, Tom, first. Let me, I'll say, you're muted there, Tone. So let me jump in and say a couple of things. All right. Then you can maybe, because there's a couple of things you might want to respond to. One, there's two different broad categories I'd like to cover. And one is like Holly was talking about, institutional issues and bureaucracy. So I'm not going to name any of the institutions here because I don't want to get anybody, not just in trouble, but even as cast aspersions. These are wonderful people we're talking about, but there are institutional rules that we run up against that can put boundaries around what we feel like we ought to do ethically, as well as what we want to do professionally. So there was somebody at one institution, and we've worked with many of them, so you couldn't possibly know which one I was talking about. One educational institution that had restrictions that they felt that they were bound by because of the State Department of Corrections and a particular prison program. They didn't want then faculty who had taught with the program to have any kind of contact afterwards with students, incarcerated students who had been inside. Now, Tone and I don't work that way, and we are involved with various people, and including Tone has been instrumental in helping working with attorneys and different teams and getting people to be able to come home. I've written letters and given testimony for some of those people, and yet we were being told by somebody at an institution, no, you mustn't do that. It could get this program in trouble. So what to do? And we had to try to find a workaround that we respected that person, that would respect their positionality and what they were dealing with, but also let us do ethically. And it was Tone who was the architect of it. I won't even go into the details, but was an architect of a workaround for that particular thing. That's one kind of thing of different rules in different settings and institutions, and we're crossing over a lot of them and what to do. The other is, I'm just going to talk about how this has worked in Chester, a city near Philadelphia, near Philadelphia, near Swarthmore, not so much with TJI, but it relates to what Tone and I have to deal with too. And that's just personal relationships. Swarthmore is near Chester. It's like a mini Camden, like maybe 35,000 people, oldest city in Philadelphia, fantastic city, lots of great projects and people there, but also saddled with all kinds of socioeconomic economic hurdles and has gotten screwed by the state capitol on a bunch of different dimensions. When Swarthmore, when we work with one community partner, it's sometimes the word is out in the street of why are they working with those instead of this guy instead of this person? Why us? Why not them? And so doing one positive thing can lead to ripples and resentment. And it's nobody's at fault with that. It's just we're all people and we may be making missteps. And so just navigate. And also, if one partner falls out with another one, then we're caught in the middle there. How do we keep both of our relationships strong in that? And that's a big thing. I'm not looking to solve that here, but I put it out there because I think folks might have some perspectives on that they can offer in their own kind of small groups. People are complex and social groups are complex. And so we're working with all of those people and social groups, and that makes our work, complex as well. Tone, what do you think?
I agree 100%, but you know me, Ben, I'm gonna call it what it is, the structural violence of systems, right? Some of our systems and how they operate are just structurally violent, right? And they're a direct threat to our public health. And we don't see them as that way, right? We can't even get to safety until we have these systems become healthy and humanizing. So, and like to Ben's point, I'm saying, Ben, send me the letter. I'll write it. I'll put it on my letterhead and I'll send it in, right? It's your words. All they need to do is get something to the judge, right? But the very institution that said, as a social experiment, let's see what higher education does and how it affects recidivism and stuff like that, are the same ones telling the educators, but you can't participate in this process when they come home. Like, and you would scratch your head as an educator and say, wait a minute, who better to be able to talk to a judge or to a prosecutor about how this person, this whole human being, has been progressing and how education has transformed their life, but you have a memorandum of understanding that says you can't do that. And who would sign such a thing, right? So the thing is what we call in new entry, you created this pop-up barrier by aligning yourself to an agreement, right? So is this a continuation of propertization of Black and brown bodies, right? So now I can educate you, but I can't help you when you come home. I can't continue that process of mentoring. Could you imagine the people not being able to be associated with Ben after he made such an impact in their lives in the most darkest moments because of an agreement that he didn't even know existed or agree to it? And as we get to these, like, we become complicit in systems where we don't challenge it. So my thing is like, I'm outside of the box. I color outside of the lines, but I play within the rules, right? You can't do it, but they can't tell me I can't do it. So let me show you all of these businesses and all of these nonprofits that I have that you can put your words on, right? Under the auspices of this organization without ever violating any of those conditions that they unfairly put in place. So when you have a person that's been locked up since they were 14, and Ben has been working with them for 2 years and says this guy needs to be home, but he can't go and testify at his hearing before a judge who says, I agree with you, but I need to hear from people in the community. They don't want to hear from people like me. So now I've reached my limit. They want to hear from educators like you and people that have worked with them, that have, I guess, in enough subculture, you have a different stain than I do. What that means is you have more credibility than I do when it comes to educating people, whether they be on campus or in a carceral space. You are the expert. But then when I reach that limitation, there's a roadblock there that stops you from doing it. And then I'm saying, nah, here we go. This is where we become thought partners. This is where the love comes in. And we're saying, segregation was legal, right? At one time. It was legally okay to segregate. But people did not obey, even though it was a legal structure. It's what John Lewis calls the good kind of trouble. So I'm saying, nah, Ben, get that to me. Let me send this in and I'll do it this way and you're covered. And it all comes back to me or the organizations that I'm partnering with and collaborating with on the ground.
But let me just remind you, it was so clever, actually. You had me send you a letter to TJI saying, we'd be happy to work with this person if ever they come home and offer them this kind of remunerative work. So I was writing to Tone, not to a judge. Tone could submit that letter as part of the thing there, and I wasn't violating anything because I wasn't writing in for the person's case. That was super smart. I want to just point out that part. I never would have thought of that. Yeah.
So I just want to celebrate the creativity, the persistence that it takes to really try to do humanizing work in dehumanizing structures, and really kind of lean into that with our last question, this notion of creativity, imagination, and vision, right? So when you think about the work that you're doing together, would love to hear your thoughts about, what is your vision for where this work could go? What do you hope to accomplish together? And maybe we'll start again with Tone and Ben.
Okay, I mean, I feel I talked a lot, and so I'll just keep this short. You won't be surprised to hear that we have big hopes because there's no time limit to stuff. It's not like we've got a 2-year window and therefore that's the end of stuff. Tone's coming out in early December to do an event, a panel with a bunch of our alumni and students. What I really though want, we haven't talked about yet, is our students, so people, a lot of Sword Boy students don't realize how close Camden is. It's as close as Philly. We are so fortunate to be a liberal arts college it's near rural Pennsylvania, near Chester, near Philly, near Camden, New York, DC, and so on. So we want them to be able to go and start doing policy advocacy with TGI. That's another thing Tone hasn't even talked about, but that's something they do. We believe in the idea that policy in general, public policy, ought to be shaped not just by people sitting in a state capitol who have no experience with it. That's us doing things for other people or about them, but rather informed by those who are experiencing it or have experienced it. So the families of the incarcerated, the currently incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, our students are hungry for that. I'm sure it's the case with a lot of folks here. The students want to do some kind of things like book learning, but they want to be able to figure out what difference this can make in the world. That's one of my next step goals, is to help have Tone and all of Tone's compatriots help us to be able to do that kind of applied, engaged scholarship work of working with them on different advocacy stuff.
Tone, do you want to add anything, or you might be frozen?
Frozen. He hasn't moved in a while.
All right, we'll definitely come back to you, Tone, and then Holly and Susan, do you want to speak to your aspirations and grand visions?
Yeah, since Ben mentioned policy and advocacy work, that's part of the broader vision for us. Is Alabama doesn't have Medicaid reimbursement for doula services, and over half the people in Alabama who are giving birth, they're insured through Medicaid. We're providing them with doulas. Those doulas need to be paid equitably for the work that they do. So the research piece that Holly's working on is providing the data that we can take to the state and begin that work of changing the Medicaid reimbursement laws. So the broader vision is that anyone in Alabama who wants a doula could have access, because we know that doula services improve birth outcomes for birth givers and for babies.
And just to piggyback off of that, that's a pretty heavy lift in this state, having come from getting my PhD somewhere that's extremely progressive in this regard. And so that our big vision is to make sure to have doula care available for anyone who needs it, right? Anyone who needs it and anybody who wants it. And so that vision requires a lot of local level data that we don't have. And so that's what we're really busy spending our time doing right now, is collecting quantitative and qualitative data that can support that cause, as well as leveraging the work that we are doing or that we have done already to get into spaces where we can represent the work that Birthwell is doing. And so that's been really helpful in terms of thinking about this partnership, because Susan and Dahlia have been doing this work for 10 years. They have connections in the community that I don't have. And I also interface with groups and organizations and people that they don't interface with because of my position at the university. So it is a really nice relationship in that way, in terms of being able to maximize the distribution of the information that we do have to be able to work toward this cause. And then in terms of students, Ben brought up talking about bringing students into the fold. And so I always ask Birthwell, I say, what do you need from the students that we have? So I always go to them first. And so they usually have anywhere between 2 to 5 students working with them at any given time on what their needs are for their organization. But I also see our community engaged work and my involvement with Birthwell as an opportunity to continue to educate students, even who are not doing internship work, about the importance of community engaged work, as well as the importance of our mission as doing birth doula work and reproductive justice research. So it's been really interesting to me to watch this process unfold, where I feel like a lot of the work that we're doing, both with the students and also with the professionals that we interface with, is not just research, but it's also educational opportunities.
Thank you all so much. And hopefully we can reconnect with Tone. But in the meantime, this is a good time to maybe transition to Q&A with our participants. We have quite a large number of you. So if you are okay with putting questions in the chat, that might be the easiest way for us to kind of facilitate some Q&A now. Welcome back, Tone. We just transitioned to Q&A.
For some reason, this I guess bandwidth or internet just went out, but I'm back. I put it on my phone. I mean, on my Wi-Fi on my phone. So
great. Well, we're glad to have you back. And actually, I'm realizing you didn't get a chance to weigh in on the last question. Ben put forward a vision for what he's hoping you can do together, but we want to hear from you as well. What's your grand vision for your collaboration and where you want it to go?
For me, it is creating a space where we can bridge a lot of these conflicts and a lot of these social tensions, right? It's different, like when I walk on to Swarthmore campus and Princeton campus, and I feel like I belong, right? It shouldn't be a kid that grows up and born in North Philly, moves to Camden. He doesn't feel like he could go any further than these two spaces, right? These spaces become culturally inclusive to help all of our people to become better human beings and to be in service of one another. And one of the hardest things right now is just opening doors and opening our hearts, you know. And my thing is that what I tell a lot of people that I work with or people that I'm in service of, they go, but like, why do you go so hard? And I'm saying, you know, I'm blessed to be in a position because nobody went as hard for me, you know. But I understand that this work is not just a Tone work or a Ben work, it's an R work. So my vision is to get to that work where, you know, the people that are doing things to destroy a lot of this stuff, we have to be just as strong and determined and organized. You know, it's not that we're outnumbered, we're out organized, and we have to organize in a way to where we're creating these spaces to that heal and that help and that is in service of. And whatever service that we provide, we have to do it together. We can't do it in silos and by ourselves. So my vision is to make sure that we create a platform, we create a methodology to where we can come together, you know. And like my biggest thing is I come from an environment that doesn't show love. It's about love right now for me. And everything I do in love, I do in integrity, and I do with the people behind me in mind.
Thank you, Tone. That was such a beautiful way to kind of culminate the panel discussion and transition into our Q&A. And we have a question from Donna Downs. Thank you for offering this up. For the university professors, how do you track community partners and best understand their needs as you work with other professors who can meet different needs of the partners? For example, sustainability professors might offer one thing to a particular partner, while communication professors might offer something different. How do you best understand? So that's a great question. Like, are there ways where you might connect partners with other folks around the institution that might be able to be of use in ways that you can't? And kind of for the community partners, and I think some of you alluded to this, are there ways that you're giving access to your faculty partners to, folks or community members that they might not be able to access readily? So I don't know if anyone wants to jump in to start that.
I'll speak.
Um,
Go ahead. Sorry to cut you off.
I see somebody on here that is the epitome of what you just asked in that question. Hey, Dr. J, I see you. And I remember we've been bringing Dr. J's class to life and doing it in a way to where bringing that unique experience, like, which is really outside of the line. When you're incarcerated, people don't think that you read. They don't think that you're intellectual, that you digest the material. And that the fact that, professors from Swarthmore would open up their classrooms on Zoom in a pandemic for us to be able to share. And really what it does is it raises the bar for your student, right? It really opened up to saying like, wait a minute, they read Foucault. They understand Hobbes and Locke. They like, and they got Nietzsche. They really, really going in on this stuff. And it's so much more than just a grade, right? So education for us and the way we do it, and to do the thing in a way to where education is to teach us to be effective handlers of power. And if we're not doing that, what are we doing?
Holly, do you want to jump in?
So that's a really good question, Star. And I'll say that I do have a couple of colleagues in the College of Community Health Science who have expertise that I don't have and connections I don't have that I've happily connected them with Birthwell. But I will also say that a lot of my colleagues are actually not community engaged researchers, and they're not interested in being community engaged researchers. So I have to be really mindful of bringing them into the fold or introducing them to Birthwell to make sure that they are able to have a reciprocal relationship in terms of them bringing their expertise and their interest with what Birthwell needs. So it is an interesting process in terms of appraising, kind of appraising your colleagues to say, this is a close community partnership of mine and we have a strong trusting relationship, and building onto this relationship needs to be part of that process. And so it's interesting. I don't think it's simply as easily as sending someone an email. It's really a continuous conversation and a collective effort.
It's a great point, Holly. Yeah, and let me I'm going to put we have a mapping tool. It's only a pilot right now because it's only got so many things entered into it. But we use this. I put it into the chat there so that community partners and faculty members can put in projects that they're working on and can see it. You can look things up by keyword to see who's doing what, so that people can, first of all, see if there's community partners interested in working with somebody. They can see which faculty are interested in which kind of things. But part of it's also for us just sweat equity. We have a lot of staff members at the Lang Center. And so 2 other staff members and I, all of whom do some teaching and then some administrative stuff, basically have a portfolio of all the faculty members, and we meet with them. We try to have coffee once a semester or so and hear what they're up to, so that if something comes up in the community with a community partner, we can talk to folks and say, well, so-and-so is working on. That's the sort of in-person social capital part. And then we have that map too. But Holly, the point you're making is so important also, that there's also other kinds of training and stuff that needs to be in place, as opposed to just sending an email or introducing somebody. And we offer some kinds of training for faculty, but I want to say that's one great thing about Campus Compact. It's a resource where there are so many things like webinars, staff people, and so on, that can help people who don't have that staff to do it, to help other faculty members to get up to speed, which I appreciate a lot about the organization.
Susan, do you have any thoughts about kind of helping? I know Holly mentioned that in some ways, Birthwell has been kind of created some access to getting in touch with different community members who might be able to contribute to the research process. So I'm not necessarily seeing another question, but one that's coming up for me, maybe it's really about, recognizing that within whatever institution you're working within, right, there's all these priorities that you're sort of told you need to focus on. And for faculty, it's around research and teaching. And often this gets classified as service, misclassified as service. I can imagine for community partners, there's so many things you need to do in terms of providing direct service or like the day-to-day administration of the work. So how do you manage kind of all the time and energy it really takes to be in relationship with each other, simultaneously with kind of doing whatever the sort of work of the institution is requiring? Anyone want to start with that?
As Holly mentioned, it's a bandwidth issue for us. We're such a small organization, and one of the reasons why Holly's mostly worked with my co-director, who's the program director, is that's just how we have to divide our stuff. So she's naturally more working with Holly unless it comes to administrative stuff, which is more in my wheelhouse. And then sometimes there's some overlap with some program things.
I think the important thing to point out, though, is that as our relationship grows and as the work that we are doing expands, Susan, I mean, it's hard to create those sort of delineations anymore. Like, we can't just say this is just only for Dahlia, because Susan is such an instrumental part of everything we do in terms of thinking about program development and managing it all. So it's the nice thing about watching this relationship grow is you do see how, it sort of starts with relationship building potentially with a smaller subset of folks from the organization that you get to know really well. And then it sort of continues to grow and branch out from there as the partnership develops. But in terms of managing it all, I haven't figured out how to create more than 24 hours in the day. It's on my list of things to do. But I do. And so I'm an anthropologist, so a lot of the work that we do tends to last a little longer than most disciplines, but the work is you have to recognize the slow time it takes to build relationships. And that's not just between you and your community organization, but also between your community partners. And like Tone has mentioned, I think a couple of times now, what it's like for them to come into the academic space. And that work takes time as well, or vice versa when you're going into a community organization for a larger board meeting or something like that. So giving grace to the process, I think, is critical. And the challenge with that is that the university doesn't always recognize that you need that kind of time. So one of the things that I've tried to do with Birthwell is develop rapport building opportunities that are also a part of the research that I do. Right. So there's opportunities to build rapport with participant observation and doing focus groups or doing interviews, but we're also talking about what Birthwell needs, and we're also spending time together. So as someone who does anthropology and qualitative research, that it lends itself to that, but it does take time.
I think for me, a key ingredient is knowing the rules, right? And that what rules are helpful, what rules are harmful, right? And they may not be intention, but talking to policymakers and stuff like that. So like I do a lot of legislative work and going before the legislators over here in New Jersey. And we were doing this even while we were incarcerated to make education mandatory in all New Jersey's prisons. It's not an easy thing to do. How do you get legislators to come into the prison to hold a town hall meeting in the prison, listening to carceral citizens and talk about strategies about what's needed and to come home and to succeed and flourish and not have this cycle of recidivism go on? And one of the things was talking to then Assemblywoman Bonnie Watson Coleman, who's now Representative Bonnie Watson Coleman for New Jersey, and saying, let's make education mandatory in all New Jersey's prisons. Let's start there, right? And let's look at what you did. Right. So if the DOC or any legislator say that it isn't, you made registering for sex offenses mandatory. You made everybody that's convicted of a crime, been duly convicted of a crime, has to give up their DNA, right? And you just juxtaposed it against the two things that were like, it could be good and it's also harmful in it, but also, well, why aren't we making education mandatory in all of our prisons, right? Unless you can demonstrate that you have some type of mental health issues or some type of disability that you can't do this, right? And in learning that, I learned that the bill that was passed was a good bill, but it was a paper tiger, because at that moment I learned that there was no funding to support it. So we have a law in the books, but there's no funding to support the law. So, and then working with Ben and working with Swarthmore, working with Rutgers and Fairleigh Dickinson and Princeton, right? Working with all of these institutions of higher education and saying, let's not only just build relationships, but let's build equity in these relationships. And let's understand that equity doesn't mean, right, that a lot of people think, well, it's the opposite. People think equal means equity, right? Everything being equal, that there's equity in a relationship. No, it wasn't that way. But then when we began to become thought partners and working on the grassroots level and saying like, yeah, coming home, we can't have a cookie cutter approach, right? We have to do this in a way to where each person, like person-centered work, was helping everything that the person needs, and not just the person, but what does the community needs from that person in order to not worry about being harmed or anything else from that person. That's that restorative approach, right? Which will transform communities. And how do we do that if we're afraid to have conversations, to sit in rooms and have those difficult discussions? So getting to that space to where we're having, my professors would always teach, we navigate those tensions that are going to determine our altitude and our outcomes and our processes.
Thanks, Tone. We have a couple of questions that have come in. I think one that I missed early on about sustainability of the partnerships. And are there ways that you are institutionalizing your work so that it, is sort of becomes bigger than you, or, can be sustained at an institutional level? Ben, I wonder if you want to start, since you didn't get a chance to weigh in.
Or, I'm glad I kind of talked enough, so I was glad to have the others address that question. It's in the chat. Not I see it's Sarah's question, the last one, right? My eyes have gotten so much worse during the pandemic. Reading this, so it's the specific one from Sarah, or the general one about how to use this institutionalize or sustain projects so they outlive.
Yeah, so there was one early on in the chat chain that was about sustainability institutionalizing.
Yeah, it's such a great question, because none of this shouldn't be about any one person and stuff. And like my term, the term at the Lang Center is a 5-year term. I was renewed for a second 5-year, and then I'm back to the faculty, and that it's as it should be. We rotate. We think our staff members are fabulous, and because they're so great, they may wind up getting other opportunities elsewhere too. And we have to have things, if we care about the work, to make sure that they endure. And so we've tried to build up, for things that have been successful partnerships, we've tried to build budget lines for specific partnerships and specific areas. We have different, I gotta say this, we try to decenter the center, or and decentralize the Lang Center by saying, there's all these areas that individual community partners and faculty members and students have more knowledge about than any one of us does. So why don't we try to get resources out to where they are, that they can have regular access to, so that they can keep up doing the good work that they're doing. And we try to divide it in different areas. Areas like sustainability, environmental sustainability, environmental justice. There might be something on public health too. And so there's pots of money for those folks to access. But beyond that, I just want to say that the reason why the question is so important, without just addressing it now, is that we've all seen the phenomenon too of things like drive-by volunteerism. I've heard somebody at University of Pennsylvania call it that, right? Of where the class lasts for a semester or the research project lasts for a short time, but the problem is ongoing and the folks dealing with it are still there. How do we get the colleges and universities to commit to something that's more long-term? And for me, the longer answer would be a case-by-case kind of thing, but being aware of the issue and the problem is the first step. It's such a long-standing problem with higher ed.
Holly, do you also have thoughts about institutionalizing the work?
Well, mine might be a little bit less polished than what Ben's about to say, but one of the ways that I've been a part of trying to institutionalize the work is to be heavily involved with our Center for Community-Based Partnership in whatever way seems appropriate, whether that be, going to their council meetings or building closer relationships with the faculty and staff that work there, and being able to find ways to voice your opinion both formally and informally to that center. And one of the things as a junior faculty member that I'm constantly talking about is how can we work together to get more institutional recognition for the work that we're doing that's community engaged, right? What can we be doing through this center to support people who want to sort of decenter the top-down approach to doing research? And so a lot of conversations have emerged from that, and I'm actually going to a council meeting next week that I was invited to share my thoughts around ways that can be done, particularly in terms of the evaluation of dossiers for junior faculty.
Thanks, Holly. So we did want to make sure there's some time for breakout room conversations so you can kind of process and reflect on what Holly and Susan, Tone and Ben have shared, and really consider what you might be able to infuse into your own partnership praxis. I do have some prompting questions that I'll put in the chat that you can use to help you start your small group conversation, but feel free to have the conversation that you need to have about community engaged relationships to make the time meaningful for you. And we'll probably spend like around 10 to 12 minutes in these conversation groups, and then we'll come back together to close out. If you happen to get into a room and nobody is there, because we know that people tend to leave when the breakout groups open, please just come back to the main room and we can reassign you to another breakout room so you can have those conversations. Here are the questions. Sorry, they come out just kind of all lumped together, but they're in the chat for you to reference when you go into your breakout rooms. And I'll ask Natalie and Shaquan to go ahead and open up those breakout rooms for folks when you get a moment. All right. Welcome back. Glad you're all rejoining us for these last few minutes to close out our time together. All right. Well, I hope the panel discussion and breakout conversation provided an opportunity for you to really think deeply and in new ways about how you nurture and sustain community engaged relationships. Thank you to all of you participants who joined, and particularly this group here who stuck with us to the end. So glad to have you with us. Thank you especially to our generous and inspiring panelists doing powerful and transformative work that allows us to see what is possible when faculty and community-rooted leaders move beyond traditional notions of partnership to become comrades and co-conspirators in the work of social change. So however you all want to express appreciation for our panelists, please take a moment to do so, whether it's in the chat or with your emojis or clapping. Thank you so much. And then finally, thank you to Campus Compact for creating and convening spaces that allow us to grow and learn and labor together toward fulfilling the promise of higher education community engagement. And with that, I will turn it back over to Natalie to share some forthcoming opportunities and close us out.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Star, for coordinating this and for leading this discussion. I think it was a fantastic discussion, and thank you all for being here. Just a couple of quick notes. We do have the second in our dialogue series next week, Facilitating Conversations for Change, Leading Constructive Dialogues. We have the first in our Building Resources series called Building Confidence and Making Sense of Fundraising for Community and Civic Engagement, and that's coming up on December 1st. And for anyone who is a Campus Compact member and interested in nominating a Newman Civic Fellow, that process is open currently, and we're having a session next week to help folks with the application process. So Shaquan put in the chat the link to our events page. All of that can be found there. And obviously, please stay informed about what's coming up, because STAR is going to be hosting more of these great conversations in the future, and we're really looking forward to connecting with all of you. So thank you again to everyone who's here and to our panelists. Oh, Cindy's asking about our 2023 conference. We are not having a conference in 2023. We will be announcing soon where our 2024 conference will be, but please stay tuned. We do have a lot of in-person opportunities that are going to happen in the spring. So all of those should start populating our events page soon. So thank you all again, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks all.